Ganjin de lo naroda Malai Juje Gambo Ba Deza Yeza Ganjin Gama Ba Jeye Jonje Juban Nanda Rada Zarzam Bardin Robazo Zaja Jilang Anibe Nyamin Dongo Dabo Gajila Zorwan de Zogajila Mana Jaban Zena Nanda Zenjila Jelo Ganje Gamba Zamba Yin Zena Gala Chayin Me Bada De Dai Jube Gonjela Nyinga Yemba Me Barzanjela Mugu Ganje Govar Zamba Yin Menga Dergonje Lama Janda Zorwan de Begonjela Jume Mugu Jewa Zenjela Yeme Ganje Nguye Zamba Yin Ganja Dobe Ngowo Zoma De Ganja Begonjela Gonzalo Dan Java Zenjela Nando Ngowo Juga Zomba Yin Jaya Maye Jaya Jarvala Aroba Jave Gonjela Korande Yerme Dobar Zenjela Jeva Ganda Yanda Lama Dharme Juje Barla Lon Juje Zada Lam Je Yonde Radone Jange Gomba Yorda Yo Zanje Juda Zoje Jona La Zanja Barada Dade Jazai Dage Jenzo Jembe Zonan Jen Rola Benze Sanjen Raba Yo Zanje Judan Zojen Jona La Zanja Barada Dane Jazan Je Dage Jenzo Jebe Yin Rola Benze Zanje Draba jo zanje judan zoje jona la zanja barada dane jazai dage jenzo jibe zonan jen rola benza sanje draba jo zimje damje dewa dan deve jada Dembare jurje donga da donga je jadan ravare jurje Deva damba da mandravare jurje nyere jada nidan rar Tanyo jimbola nebare jurje zimje damje deva Deve jadan dembare jurje donga da donga je jadan ravare jurje donga re mebe deva damba dam ravare jurje nyere jadan nyedan rar tanyo jimbola nebare jurje simje damje deva Deve jada dembara jurje dongara da donga je jada dravara jurje Deva damba dam dravara jurje nyere jada nyedan dravara Tanya jembola nebar jurje dada zimje damje lo jizan rovara zin labda zor julamda rovara zinje labda zor landra bazavara zinje labda zor Turba yige zan javara zinje labda zora dada zimje damje lo juzan ro zinje labda zora julamda rovara zinje labda zolandra baza Son turba yige zan javara zinje labda zora dada zimje damje lo jizan rova zinje labda zora julamda rova zinje labda zolandra bazavara zinje labda zo turba yige zan javara zinje labda Be my geza don bola ya de joge ngada ni ma jone geza or the ganda ma da je zenje la zere Jesus ane jandera zambala dranjo wan ye go ge da lo da ma nga ra zo wa me a wa be da ga ra be ma ze de wa wa me a wa be da ga ra be ma do den za be ze za Maya Zanza Zarwa Zede Bala
Dozo yela konge padra rigve doji shablang chantara panden tave lama Rinpoche tage jewara pende denyon gadin chembe gone jezon de gozon toje ngodo zado. Tene tanda ngaranzo tatring weekend dela kajo senke ngaranzo de nala yog de patang te mase bache kita zig denkin kase cho pencil yawa yana yang tene thamala ngado delik sene shya ta na ko ta tanyam ba semje tamje lana me bayan ta ba zog sanje ke koma ta par cha ta te che do tambe chu samo Shogani Yamba de Colon Chanchon Chodo to Innocent the Terchen Barway.
First of all, I would like to greet all of you and say good morning to everyone who is attending this teaching, either in person here or watching and listening to it on the webcast. And also encourage you to generate bodhicitta as your motivation for listening to the teaching by thinking that all beings throughout space must achieve perfect Buddhahood, and that it is in order to bring that about that you will listen to the teachings.
Tene tange tu jundo hiwanda bore ngaranso ngone thane ndowa riktoke semjin danyi phamek ndowa khare yenaya sama dewan dongke shada donga mendoke shada tende dabo jere de yobade te indu kapsala ta dela phembeke londa boji je jere jawa dog sanji jomden de ke yesola hyo gosla tambe chu nyamsa len senkin tela ta to gondo konjo noban dabo Mena Mronda what carried and on Tanegata, Sem Carpo Soya, the Hidaki Karchim body, on a Tanege. Rab Chona, Chanjo, Sem, on a Tanege, Togo and Davori. Or Chanjo, Sem, Ye, Mata Payena, Jeta, Guitar, Ying on a Tanege, Chupa, Human Ravoji, Yenaya, Tenikora, Samba Zana, Southern Lamiaza. Samba ngena satan lamya ngi sen song yobari tene chesur tela hendan de ja hewa torwa kupata demba che nang namdo tela ta mege jo same nganda boji nala yue devanda boji yena jere jigdin paping ngona zebo hida yori pe masip zebo yori kane sena chesula torwa yori hewa yori Jamba yori, take it down on a tanetini, mega ramon nang send a seg yori thing, the castle and nana yop a remote chilola ngona, pe massive calacabo yori, zebo double hida yori, the inaya, chopa yanda exort trembaina, tate on a taneke, manzi package, just so on double. The red yore, the tea in the capola, on a tan, samba carbochicori, semia tomjela, pende yopic logic. Take under chen a jig over yores and a penna, tambo, rangi lula, pe lama, rangi lute, aransoke, hajange, yebarton thing. Tenin nana, menjo zo, chana to loke yo. Manze Pandavachi Yona and Zeb Takin number Nasa was on the Yan there tongue. Tenete Davachi Tanto, me Sama Tulo, can't take a ten, teni, ye the Homa, Tona Mountain Pamepandavachi, so okay. Tapian Davating around so Zoyori. Tate Zoga Yori, Tating around Sola, take Goa, take or Jata, but Tahako Kari, Kone Zoga Yori, take around to Keramari, stand over it to get Semje Tamjetela, Yagan, Zeva, Dungan Mepa, Nata Mepa, turning on a Tanekita, Panjoke Chopa, Tenin, Doko Ponsam, Sopa, Sajuta, Conju Yobandavachi, Kom, Mogon King, Semje Tamje Yinaya. Ngone tane kita nasa dunga laso pa me banda wachita tende gongi shada re di yore tene te re di yobate ta thangbo ne ngwe sunya da wote tende te ngwe sunya de shira ke karchim bori te ngwe mazin ba yena kora nasa ngwe yete ngwe mazin ba yena tene dagda ten da matin da wutan me banda wacha sa wari te indo kausala Nasa thing sen that tella pembeke mentioned about the go yori. They end the cherry and church of capsulatini, sosu geta, gegging shunayaron. Jomden the Sanje Jomden de la Shunayaron, Kanda Khan in a menayan, tonda, chu sonkin tella, then membegan to he. Rana nebegan to he. Then chu show tella, then sosu ge nasa kande in a. Della Pembigatene, Mende, Savagan to hear that what you can and to hear something going to turn Yamsa language in the Sungayo days. They in the capsule that was so young a capsule, Lama re, church show. Naran churn yanking in Sambanda what you check, take a pata till a chancho the same general pendig lotte and me. Te me sana nasi ke mente nasal pembe mente mazevari maza ne pakina na chok dena tene cancer ke nasa yena yarong tha ke nasa yena yarong chimbe ke nasa yena yarong rana yepe ke nasa tene thag mari te me tu kasola rana yang pemba meba yana yang pemba meba te so mambo chi thola song de bandabo Tatende chicken nesunda boji chagri, te in the capsule, te tabo member gone, on a tane, lamala, tat on the chu sunken la, teni penna, membegan doshi, rana nepegan doshi, chu shuatella, new to servagan doshi, dabo tendation and doshi, something at all, tendation and nango yori, te yore, te inayan, tat te yan, jera injecting la. Tene Lun Sour Jepik, Tapshit number not so but Nanking, Medic number not so by Yori, member number not so by Yori. Shepherd and Papari, that take Tandeke, Kora, Jewa, Homeke, Lela, Tin, Tandeke, Lutin Top de Bande, Tene Yonto Debatang, Nasani, Kana, Kansan, Tartobatang, Tene Sem Donga set up a last opege. 20 Ponsum Sokwa the Take Yori. Take Yori the Enaya, Kova Toma Mepani, Yomarik Palatine, Tenin Tama Mepaki Padula, Yani Yandor, Kova de la Lemmer Chepate, Takana Tene Younger Yorisena, Marik Palatine, Rebe, Yoda Tender Jonike, Sotola, Kova de la Kogi Yori. Tetabon Kovan de la Korveke Nasate. Kana ten takora koa tender ludos and logo yor sena. Then on negata marek pate, marek pala, was in zin topatan. Tella ten tell a true pegata, tender joining sorcare, yimbate, ludo tato latini, gone topege gone, tenin tatoke, that sauce on koa tajenda what you saw, tenin, the bacon the gone compenda what you saw. Tendechen Zogo Yode Tatela, Kade, Goa Tatela, Menjete Nam Mata Bayena, Tenequara Nasa Tape Reva Mevanda, Tenin Coatela and touching the big Revanda, what they say, Calecapo Yore, stay into that, to some yetum, Yapore. Then they could go take check it. Yes, Nanjana.
Drink water.
Into Bosan, Pemi Jabagoya.
Some drink a and attend them and the
Ludo Hako,
Reg Ming Malamnata.
I say, Kadeka Saturday.
All right, then men and Yinkado. Gamang of the Palam Yella J. Mashepada child.
Okay, then they don't get lost nothing.
As I frequently say, all beings of the 6 states of samsara, whether they are our enemies, our friends, or unknown to us, all are the same, and the same as us, in wanting to be happy and not to suffer. What we are doing in practicing Dharma is trying to help them achieve what they want. In this regard, the greatest possession we can have or acquire, the greatest wish-fulfilling jewel we can ever possess, is benevolence. At best, benevolence, good-heartedness, is bodhicitta. But even when it's short of that, even if your involvement with Dharma is somewhat casual, nevertheless, a benevolence toward all beings is still the most precious thing you can have. As is said, with a good heart, all of the paths and stages will be good as well. We have another saying, that while tigers wear their stripes on the outside, humans wear their stripes on the inside, which means you can't really tell what somebody else's motivation is. But we have to take responsibility for our own motivation. And the best way to do this is to simply extrapolate from our own situation. Think about ourselves and then empathetically extend that to others. Take your own body as an example. As it says in the teachings, taking your own body as an example, don't harm others. We are busy in the service of our bodies. We feed our bodies, we clothe our bodies, both for the sake of comfort and beauty. When anything goes wrong with our bodies, we take medicine to fix them. And we engage in an astonishing degree of exertion in all manner of cosmetic application of various types. In short, we want our bodies to feel as good and look as good as possible. This is actually true of all beings. All beings are the same. They all want to feel good. They want their bodies to feel good, be strong, be healthy, last for a long time, and possess whatever that particular being conceives of as beauty. The only way to cure any disease is to start with correctly diagnosing it. If you don't understand the cause of illness or the cause of symptoms of illness, you can't even begin to cure it. In this regard, it's best if we view our teachers, including the Buddha himself, as physicians from whom we seek a medical treatment, ourselves as people who are ill with the disease we call samsara, and Dharma practice as taking the medicine that is given to us in the teachings. The problem we have is that oftentimes we worship our teachers. We call them Lama, and we respect them. And we listen to what they teach, but with no intention whatsoever of actually practicing it. We just like to hear it. And with no motivation of bodhicitta. It's just something that we do. We listen to Lamas talk. When you receive Dharma teachings and don't practice, this is like having a grave illness, cancer or disease of the blood or some kind of liver disease and so on. Being given the necessary medication and carrying it around in your pocket, never taking it. So the Buddha advised us to overcome this tendency we have by viewing the process of learning and studying and practicing as receiving and taking medicine from a physician. Due to our good actions in previous lives, we may be able to remain healthy physically in this life. And we may have access to medicine that will cure or at least alleviate whatever does go wrong with our bodies. But we still suffer from the oldest illness there is, which is samsara. Samsara is beginningless, but it has a cause, and that cause is ignorance. Its symptoms are the other 11 links of interdependence. The only way we can cure this illness of samsara is by accepting that it is caused by ignorance. We could even say that the other 11 links are symptoms, and the illness is ignorance. And the only way we can get rid of ignorance is by practicing. If we get rid of ignorance, we will get rid of karmic formation, which will get rid of afflicted consciousness, and so on. One by one, we will undo the 12 links of interdependent origination. But if we refuse to take our medicine, we are not going to get better.
Ta te indu kapsula ta jatange lama tang lama singende zo sarva ke kausala ngaran zo thangwa la jacha ngap chu kan gen yore lama la yena ya jacha ngap chu kan gen yore lama la yena ya jacha ngap chu kan gen yore kare de sena ta lama ngen kare yore sena penna ta lama la jacha gop chu kan gen che lama la jacha chu gen yo de wa tende ba de lama thto la de so tene so se kan daba khane yaba kare yaba de shi ne tene cha te ngone thane ke yang ta be kin gen da bo de mane wa de te yang da kin gen ma de lama yena ya tene lama ke ni khopa de mesam ga san sa lama inde ya ga yena do ga yena chu de ma ji she ga na nga ko chu de ma ji she ga yo na nga ko de ga yo na ga de che ga yo na sam be ga nom to da ban da ji lama ke lang de na tene ja cha ngap chu ga ya gen khro ga yo ma de lama tan no ga yo de te yin do ka sa la Lama tan lama nika ke bata la ngone ke tepa to tamsi ken deba singe de te maseba yoya de shira ke karchen bo yore te yo saba yena pe na lama ke lama la tepa yishi ya na te ran penge yore ma to je ke lama te la tawa yin pen do yo ma de tepa te yishi ya na ma ya khorang ke jo la yonde yo la yo ba de me la do jone ma to je ke te paris la chinan to ke te ba tam te ka te song de na la lama te na to ba ye hong ju da ne ma ne te yin do ka sa la dek de yo de te na ya so se ke rang dong la te de ke yo ma re ngo ne ta ne ke ta tan da shu ba na yin ke hm de shu pen de shu sa de ta ne ma ze ne nya de ba da ba re no yo de te ke ta wa yin ne pen ma re Lama la yena ya pena jasha ngap chu ken gen yo de thangbo ngone thane ki chu ko la shu ya the yang tene nge sanje chom den de ki jesu song ge chu ki jesu song ge gen du ki jesu song ge kon nambe ke khane na wa the ta to la che gin sen ke lan yo de te tam da ma ta sang ha dang tene chang chu sem be lam la yu shu ko kap sa la te le hla sa ge ngone thane sem je tham je de ma che ki pot ta do zo gi te tamje de jek ma le ba ta ba da tamje che me lam la ko yin sen ne pe na kelen so yo ba de te yin de ka so la ta kelen te ga sa je so ne le ka te me ba che le ba yin na la ma te ge ya sem jin go ko wa ri te yin de ka so la sem jin sam jin go ko wa ma se ba che ke kon yo sam de tang ja se ja sa mang go ko de ge yo de
De lama ke
lama ke ja de te yin de ta cho nika ke tenen chok sawa re ten chok sa na tene chenap da chakja chenpo ke tene nelo sembyo la bab sengi te da tondo kanga be ten kamo ngame ke lojo ke history lo dewa ten dawa che re ma to ton la kwa la long yo kenge pe na neson da wo tan ma re ten indo ta tene ma jong wa che ngana so che ya te shida ke kar chenpo re kare de sen ta so se ke sawa lama yang Rinpoche Dorje, kama bachu rokpa Rinpoche Dorje re, ta teke toke yeba teke ten chek parapo lomba dinde che lan roa yena, pento tek se che re on gombe ke toke malam shepa tum pape ke gone pena nganda wachik yena, tang na we ke teni koran ta shalap thashawanda wachik yembe ke ta tinda wore. Te yendu kapsala yin sola yang samlo matang wa yin yang sosu lamme ke tepa ta tamsik sosu ke de maung ke ne tang kande da bo ji le jumde ke thone chasan lo mando tundu ke te ne jasa jasam ba samlo tang gong ken da bo ji yo de ma to che ke rang go kor singen te lekin nane thaman da bo re ma to che ke cho de chuban da bo ji tawan yin ma re te endo ngara gel da wo che na yang charan so ke ngenzo la tam de song da wo che ne ngana ge ke ngala ma tam de song gong he de ya sa jang ga de yo re 50 yo re khon de ke na ya thu je ma lam ta sem je tam je ma che ke bo ta de se wa ye na nga ke ro ma se wa ge ju sem ma do wa te endo ka sa la khon de la na ya 50 yo ba re nga la na ya 50 yo ba re te endo ka sa la lam tam se la sam na ya rong rang ke pe na thapa da sanje ke jesun yok ne teni Monjo Chanjo sing Domba Lama, some of Tama Yena Ronte, Tangaranso, Yatana 50k, when I think about Yodi, Masam Nutana 50 can gain about Yodi, they into capsule chu pension, it's in the Chava Yena, then they call a chara trendix in the per Tambe Jordis, Chadanan, the Jalashi Yova Yena, Chu Yenny, Yam to the Jauna. Chat so much in Mawa, Mayo, and Yaja to Yori. Tim Mazeva, Tinan carry over the church in the Yashok and Tenjan, the Chuzos and Dogries, then in the castle, Tatim Mandovaji. Ta to so Tonton day, Lacam Mangwari. Then in Jignan Hoan de la Jet Savaga Capsula, Tang around so good Melo Jalon, then kick Kanzaji, you know, oh, pay Masibari, that's setting bodies, and that get a shake your day. Some like Yandan, and some like a tonda, that did nani, lock up to 10 years, show your race. Take and got a naked mother Langabaros. Ten the castle, that on the long up to the day of our race. That day, Tabakanda, carry day of a Yenaya. Then they caught a te chuzos Mandowaji, Zogayena. Then it tanjo job jet the mirror top at the 10 yoba, devil yoba, ranona yenayang. Then it kana consum drop tunking, simji hamlet in the yano yenayang, Mount Pala Rimkendo, drop to banda with the younger, that day, tabu took a latin, the choosing gogre mato jege. Then mato jega hajang, get chudel, you got there, go back to Ramikin of a child over days.
The bond between gurus and disciples is a shared responsibility. 50% of the responsibility falls to the teacher or guru, and 50% of the responsibility for the maintenance of that bond and the successful outcome of the bond falls to the student or disciple. Some may feel that the guru only has 10% responsibility and the disciple has 90%, that the guru really, like a little king, can just sit on his fancy throne and say whatever he wants and just babble on about anything, and it's the disciple's responsibility, part of the 90%, to accept it all and swallow it all, and whether it actually helps them or not is irrelevant. That's not true. Guru has far more responsibility than that. But also, the disciple does have 50% of the responsibility. If the disciple sits there listening to the guru and thinks, I don't know about you, are you really for real, or are you just making this shit up? Are you serious? Are you just playing with us? Is this whole thing just a scam? Are you a con artist? That is not upholding the disciples' 50% of the bond. From the disciple, or from the disciple's point of view, the question of faith definitely arises. But you need to understand that whether a disciple has or does not have faith has no real effect on the guru. The faith of a disciple is not for the guru's benefit. It doesn't help the guru or gratify the guru in any way when disciples have faith. And it doesn't harm the guru when you don't have faith. If you have it, good for you. If you don't have it, that's your problem. The only person that your faith should matter to is you, because it helps you. It's like medicine. If the doctor fulfills their responsibility by prescribing the right medicine and you refuse to take it, that's your problem. It doesn't harm the doctor. But the doctor does have the responsibility of skillful diagnosis and correct prescription. When you become a teacher in the Buddhist tradition, you have a commitment. You must properly connect your students to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. You must help them form an authentic connection. Basically, you must facilitate and encourage their proper emulation of the Buddha, of the Dharma, and of the Sangha. All the more so if you are a teacher of the Vajrayana, you have a far greater responsibility. You must do your very best to help your students and, by extension, all beings. If this isn't what's going on, if the teacher or guru is just messing around and the students or disciples are just listening for the hell of it, they're both way off track. In such situations, actual transmission of the wisdom of enlightenment, the actual transmission of the blessings of a lineage and the realization of Mahamudra remain past history and are not going to occur. In my case, as you know, my root guru was the 16th Jalwan Karmapa. And his intention in traveling all over the world, as he did, was to try to help people, to help beings. Now, I may be the worst of his disciples, but nevertheless, he sent me here in order to try and do a little bit of what he did, to try to help people. If I don't try to help people, and if, never mind helping people, I don't even make any effort to fulfill my side of my bond with him, if I don't keep up my 50% of my relationship with my guru, I'm only going to hurt myself. So I have the bond of a disciple, the 50% of a disciple, as well as the 50% of a teacher. But it is our own 50% as disciples that, given the authenticity of the teacher or guru, it is our own 50% of this bond, or 50% of the responsibility of this bond as disciples, that determines the outcome of the relationship. If we don't keep our end of the bargain, it's going to fall apart. If you have something upheld by a blanket, you need to lift the blanket by all four corners. If one or more of the four people lifting it up drops their corner, whatever you're trying to lift is going to roll right off that blanket and crash on the ground. In any case, time is short, and we're all very, very busy. Nowadays, nobody seems to live much longer than 100 years. And if someone makes it to 100, we make a big deal out of it. If you think about it, a lifespan of 100 years, which probably none of us will actually achieve, but we might, that's the most, is actually a lifespan of 50 years. Because we spend half our time asleep. So our maximum available time in this life is 50 years, of which a great deal has already gone by for most of us. We may not be able to achieve anything fantastic or heroic in this life, but at least we need to keep our heads above the water of the potential for being born in lower states. We need to ensure that at the very least we are born again with the opportunity to continue further along this path. If you're resolved to do at least that, then there's a point in your being here or listening to the teachings. But if you're not, if you're so jaded with Dharma that it's just something you've heard before and you're hearing now and it doesn't really make a difference, it's just something you do on Sunday morning because why not, then there's really no point in your being here, no point in your listening. Let it. Semlata.
La.
Did Jemare.
Rang semla.
Did it.
Rang semla tahi chawani. Toba zangi naso tembekap. Lak rang semla sur tebe. Tenrik teni majo somati. Te junchon teji. Nebayi naso njoyang. Gap dub na nendon taka gapa gaudebel.
Tong.
Naso njoyang. Ga taka kagamen. Gapa gap.
Did gak drop inside it. Gak bomb dropa. Neda inside it.
Gatup Nendo Tang Jona Migi Lote Pane Chang Semla Payo Something Junta Jong so than the last suppose on the wa. Rang Semla Tashi Ta Chu Mambo Jigadan de Tongyores. Rang Semla Tagore, Rang Semla Tagore and the Tongyore. Tene Jadange Lungage Pena Songyanda Vojela Chaja by Yenayang. Tene Mambo Chigasongriori, Mamma Jini Ngala too, Kipor to the Semnators and the Songriores. Pena Mambu Chila Yopek Kapda Vojena, Nga Tela in the Tene Paraposanzola, non se Mambo, so you're the general condo that was canny lap, taken none young, Tene. Make a semla Shendan Legend, Sevik, Dam number Nasoba Lava, and not take a Paropo, take a Yula, Kondosawa, the ten, Nyoma, but number Nasoba, Jevig, Josheg, you're the thing, the Memambuki Chini, Alatago Grace. Chipur Dubek, come that was in a Tenekoran, Depik and Namto, Mahopag and Namto, Tatek and Namto, Zambuk and Namto, Niembek and Namto, number Soba Chicken, Yoso Ayena. Tene Sam the Koran, Teme Bala Koran, Tola Tanya Wanda was a Yomong Council Wanda was a younger the Taint, Ta Rang Semla, Tashin the Tarang, Chico, Yopicapsula Rang Semla Taco Yode. Ta Rang Semla Tashi Chava the Kare Sena, Toba Zangin Haso Tembecaps, that and the Shubata Zolata, Semla Ta Yumicapsula, Zamzalan, Nomto Zambo Mambo Shagadi. Zamzala Namdo Yamba Mambo Shagari, Tate Tava Sharium Capsula, Rangi Semla, Sur Tepe, Tenik Teni, Majo Somate, Starangi Semge, Nelo Yantabatela Tayum Capsula, number topic, Tas Zambuk and Namdo Tang, Niembek and Namdo Tondo Pa Yane. Ranking Sem Yumek Nelo Tela, Sorta Yumacasula, Senek Teni Majo Samate, Ten Samjik Tang, Rig Samjik Ranking Mato Jig, Datan de was nyambeke the shim mayu page tambu kepena semda wote tene majo pa samate tate yunchon teji nebai no jo yanda dumne no naso jota yanda dumne dumdo dumne no naso Joya Gadu Nendo Tang, Jona Migi Lotte Pane Jang, Star and the Janet Te Somi Somic Samtella, that they were Gavsala, Nom to Jaggy Jesu Juksona, you got a Yamdola, Nam dot the Nursing by Zone, then Migi Lotte Jendona, Tande, Migi Lotti, Migi Lotte Latin, Migi Chawaja Chaba, Te Devo Megavan Jung Getini, Kora Yot Sando Yori, Apo Mare Sambeke Guani, Megave Lo Pambatang, Sam La Payo, some the Junta Jones, Te Samba del Pa, Yapa, Tenekora, Nomdo Karain and nursing, some jig thing, Te Range, Somatic Ngola, Teni Kora. Gyamtso batte tawa yundu gyamtso ne hilage Terchen Barway.
Hola, so did about this. Hey, you did taco sare.
Lasso.
Not so turn back up. So young cutting share jigger, the casson could draw out the laps on the concert some hakoto. Chitons at Mengak dig here Lola, Nanto Shawa Kapsayon, Nanto de la Mata, Nanto Riking Ripa, the Rangla Tagi Songadova, Flage Rangisam, Sorta, Derawa. They cheated, the Casson, the chickbook, the Moron Goma Topare, Tandek Dini Machupa, the Junjum. Did Nepam. Then a dig Sombala Nepam. Not so Joyang, Gadru, Nedu Donna, Neju Balakja was Songadua, or Lassa. Oh, yeah, Lassa. The Miguelaki Kesha should have, the Lassa. Continuing from where we left off yesterday afternoon, we now come to the song that's called Looking at Your Mind, or at least begins with the words Looking at Your Mind, which is found on page 89 of the book. The first line says, looking at your mind means this. We can infer from the beginning of the song that those who requested the song, which were two people named at the bottom, asked for instructions on looking at the mind. So he begins by saying, okay, you want to know how to look at your mind? Looking at your mind means this. We talk about looking at the mind all the time in Buddhism. No matter what context we are concerned with, we're always told, look at your mind. In order to improve our behavior on the most basic level, the advice is, look at your mind. When it's a question of assessing what your motivation really is, we're told, look at your mind to see your motivation. And of course, the beginning of profound meditation is also looking at your mind. So in these different contexts, looking at your mind can mean slightly different things. Here, especially, there is a way in which the looking at the mind in order to ameliorate your behavior and looking at the mind in order to recognize the mind's nature come together. There is a common piece of advice. When in company, watch your mouth. When alone, watch your mind. Well, when in company, watch your mouth doesn't need too much explanation. We've all had the experience of saying things that we later regretted. When you're dealing with other people, it's far more common for us to cause harm with our speech than it is with our bodies. And it's much easier to say something harmful or hurtful than to actually take physical action. So when we are around other people, what we really have to watch is our mouths, our speech. When we're alone, we're presumably not talking. I mean, if you do talk when you're alone, then you should watch your mouth then too. But presumably, you're not talking when you're alone. So when you're alone, not only when you're meditating, but whenever you're alone, you need to watch your mind. Because when you're alone, what causes the most harm is what you're thinking. And especially on a basic level, in post-meditation, we need to not invest in negative thoughts, harmful, malicious, selfish thoughts. In meditation, we need to see through thought, whether harmful or apparently beneficial. So therefore, the second line says, when you become aware of various thoughts, good and bad, or good or bad, use that very awareness to look suddenly at your mind. Now the instruction here is when you're meditating, at a certain point a thought arises. And we normally think of that thought as a cause of distraction. It may be a condition of distraction, but it is not really the cause of distraction. The cause of distraction is being distracted by the thought. The thought does not have to distract us. What happens when you become aware of the presence of a thought is that thought has brought an upsurge of mindful awareness, kind of alertness. The thought itself has triggered a response of awareness. Use that awareness to look at your mind, which means that when the thought arises, the thought is really just an occasion, a stimulus for awareness. So you look with that awareness at that awareness. And Rinpoche said, don't worry about the thought. In that situation, if you can do that, then instead of causing distraction, thoughts cause awareness. Instead of putting you to sleep, thoughts wake you up. So use that very awareness, he writes, to look suddenly, immediately, at your mind. That awareness is unaltered and fresh because it's present. Cultivate it. That is what we want to cultivate. That same awareness that becomes aware of the thought, simply look at that awareness itself. And then he says, afterward, so at the next moment, whether your mind is still or moving, in the next moment, then we might have the habitual tendency to then go back and see, yeah, but did the thought vanish or not? I know I'm not supposed to worry about the thought, but I kind of want to. Is it gone or not? Don't worry about whether the thought is gone or not, whether the mind is still or moving. In fact, I mean, obviously that thought is gone. There may be a different thought, but don't worry about the difference between stillness or movement. You're only concerned here with awareness. Whether there are thoughts in the mind or not does not in itself affect the presence or absence of awareness. So therefore he says, don't pick and choose. Don't be picky. Don't think, I can only meditate if there are no thoughts in my mind. Don't pick and choose. Give up your desire for stillness and your dislike of movement. We all begin meditation with the hope that we'll have a mind that is as placid as the surface of a lake. That's what we want. That's what we dream of. And so we dislike it when thoughts arise. We have to let go of that. Cultivate mere presence of mind. Now, the word that he uses for presence of mind here is the same word we use for, there's a nice word for it that I learned in the last 2 weeks that's maybe a little bit 19th century, but I can't remember it. Anyway, it's the same word we use for being very careful in your behavior, bayupa. And so it means presence and being on the spot, not being lost somewhere else.
Like fastidious?
No, the actual word, I remember the word now. The problem with the word is it's become used now to mean over almost compulsive attention to behavior. It'll come to me again. It's used in scrupulousness. I think that it's assessed in Western religious training. They warn you against it because it makes you too OCD about things. But here, the word payupa does mean to be scrupulous. But in this case, scrupulous doesn't mean being judgmental. It means being scrupulously present right now.
Hola. Samla bayo samli yul jong te ba ndo so.
Lari.
Tele pen to sando tondo tang loi yan nyu mang ma ja wa. Rik be sam pa de lemata rik be sam pa de lemata bayo samde ngo jong le sha ju do sam me be te sam pang tan de la pe masive karchimo yori terenge khasange chetange ta gom janke nambala tenega ngake jenje shugu mete ina loju da bugana shugu yos ta gom janke nambala khande yori sen ta pena hine da boje gom yondu teni gegen tege songu yori pe masive tene ne embata yambata teni kora data ne message saja tende da bola tene ta something bog gola yone tene rembe yendo ta leni namna chodo de jebe gone mi pa tende jela ten ta gom gole songo yode ten den tere le tambo pa ke tende chena magam pa yena ta ba yin ne chene te yong to go ma de ten den tere te ta tele shepherd pa pa je ngana so le yode ta tende chem gom yong me kap so la so yen yong ne dan da bo kham be ten won ne dan da bo chong yin da tene taking wala khundro sa ta ngana be de shiwa chene ne de bo ka so la tan do ke kenge jap dang da ting da so tene ta wa yin ne chu ma sam sam ne tene khundro sa ne shine te khundro wa ne yo do ya tende ke ngi so yo de ta te one chana goya yo ma de dangda dingda ne khonan se leka de shiwa la sem ne to tangin de so so ke leka de te ind kausala ta ti dege na ne songwa ta to la so che yorge chen che la ten ne na rang ke sem do to sam do ma ta wa che so ta na rang ke sem te la sam lo yak bo ji ta ne ta tele pen to ton pen na zang do to do ta song do wa ta sem rang yin ne ba sam tele pen to ta zang bo chi yong ma ke tap dang ton bo chi yong ma tap dang lo yi ma nyan nyan mang bo song sa tin na ta de de yo de pen na ta dang da ding da chong na ting ko la khon do sa na nyor de lo wa ting on ne ta ne take Jesus joke de mato gom Jesus ta ni jo ma ni ta tenda wo ma jo wa chi che ne re gutam Bade Lamata Bayo something or John Le State double chicken can I just lava in a Lamata the Latungo la Condo Sajo that Tundo I'm joking Ogomogotan Yegumaris. You get the digging on it. So that gets tell us to some Lotan if I am taking all Jawel. Yeah, you do some me about Tetam Pons. Tell the Yana Kaya Zaya, your money, Tetam from your papa.
It's not funny. Tell him.
I think that the Shide go, Kodo Sadat, your take all the old.
Lasso?
Lasso. You got the gas on my yaga.
That's a muscle.
Lasso.
By you chong my lasso.
I don't want to judge do some made the Tesam Pons.
Did. Now, the third stanza brings up something that's very important. He says, don't desire something better or higher than that. And refrain from intellectualization. So this refers principally to the actual Mahamudra meditation that he's describing. All you're trying to do is have sufficient awareness to be aware of itself. And you don't need anything beyond that, anything more spectacular. And you don't need intellectual ideas like about emptiness, lucidity, and all that stuff. As soon as awareness is present, other than cultivating its mere presence, there is not a speck of anything to be done, have no doubt. So anything further than that is deviation from the path, because you're introducing intellectualization and ambition of all kinds. This also has an implication for beginners as well. I don't want to be critical, but I do have something to say. That's kind of like a Tibetan way of saying, I don't mean this in a bad way. When people, Westerners especially, are taught meditation, whoever teaches it to them says, now, when you meditate, you need to practice in a quiet place where you won't be disturbed, so you can relax your mind utterly. So you need to be a little bit isolated. You need to somehow control the environment, and that brings control into the picture. And you need to have perfect meditation posture. You need to set your body into the 7 dharmas of Vairochana, and you need to stay there. There's nothing wrong, or not much wrong, with that advice. I mean, when we begin to meditate, we do need to sit down and remain more or less still and have a straight back and, not be in the midst of a flurry of activity. But the problem is that then when you start to practice, as soon as you hear the slightest noise, Tibetan is lovely. It's onomatopoeic, and I can't do it in English. He says the slightest ding ding or dang dang or bing bing or bang bang or something. Like, let's say you're meditating in a shrine room in a place that's still being built, for example, and there's going to be some, ding ding and dang dang and dong dong and dung dung and whatnot. And the problem is that for the sake of tranquility, about which you're very ambitious and very, very protective, you're very protective of your tranquility, as soon as the slightest noise occurs, you get really pissed off. In a moment, that tranquility turns into a state of being intensely pissed off. Which means that the way you're practicing tranquility is completely wrong. from the start. That is not taming your mind. Taming your mind means taming your kleshas. If tranquility is going to make you more pissed off, it would be better if you didn't do it. Seriously. Whoever's making the ding, ding, dang, dang is just doing their job. Your job is not to listen for their next noise. Your job is to meditate, if that's what you're doing. So what happens is, because there's ambition, you have a goal in mind. You want really perfect tranquility. You want to even look like, the pictures you've seen of the arhats are great. And you want to stay still. You really want to look good also. And then as soon as the ding ding starts, then your ambitions are thwarted. It's completely mundane. It's got nothing to do with Dharma. And then your meditation becomes, this is what he said that made me laugh, listening angrily for the next noise. You're just concentrating on when is he going to do that thing next, That is not Dharma, it's not meditation, and God knows it's not taming your mind. But he didn't mean it in a bad way. And then he said, if you practice that way enough, you'll actually get to the point where you'll get so pissed off that you'll keep a knife ready to go attack the person who disturbed your meditation. You'll become a meditation murderer.
Yen gap no tamje to lange tembe part lamata rigba soma heba teyimbe tenyi ma jo teyinga na jong sta tanda ngara so cheke kora ta danda bote la bades ta dala nang da sungu yore te yen gap no tamje to sta te yen da ban ta sem yin de be kan no tamje to lange tembe part lamata o sem yin do wa ha kon lange tembe part lamata rigba sama heba teyin be tenyi ma jo te ngwa la jong stan na la ngara so ge da che ho de na la yo de ngara so sem de la nyomon ge da yo de sem de la yin ge da yo de che ge da ton do ta dang dang ding ding ka de na ton do kang ga de ko ran yin ge ta che ge ko ra ran yi ge da chi de te na la ngon ne ge nyomon ge da ngoma te na la yo de te yin du ka sa la ta te la te ne pe masib mambo yin ro de dam dam lo chal de ne yin ge de dam dam la he dong la te ne yin ge de dam dam la te mo la te ne yin ge de ta nyomo nga te la te ne te ne ko ra yin wa nam ba na so ba zo se ki pe na nen da wo te nang la yo de ma do chal la yo ma de te ta bun do be ge kap so sang yi tembe pa te le ma ta se o ta te de ge do Tatari ngara mete lo kondo shu kembo sawe ki jen chen de tiki nom do ngemba tiki wan de chone tini kora yin song do samba ti ngue samba tang ya mena do cha shu kembo je jen tiki jesu singba ki ta nom do ngemba ti ngo samba da wo tinde chege nang da ti ngo samba ki ta chungwa ki kapsula tini hlangi tembe pa ti hlema ta Rikpa soma heba tenga, tenyi macho tengo chong, dondo cholam kondo tenga, ta do cha nyan do kare yimba yanta, teki cholam namba tamji kapsula tenga, chongwa neji shadam hingbo yin, yonto lame mugu chinu do, te yang gompel tang, Chillingi yang Kongor Baba Dorje so to me donging or Tonga shows.
Oh, yeah.
That's got into
Didn't draw like
that.
Now, the next stanza deals with internal distractions. It says, in the same way, whenever you are distracted. So whenever you are distracted, ultimately all distraction is internal. If a sound, for example, distracts you, what distracts you is your reaction to that sound. So all distraction is really just being swayed or distracted by thought. So whenever you're distracted, as soon as that sudden awareness is present, so as soon as awareness arises in response to the distraction, just cultivate it without alteration. Just cultivate that awareness without alteration. It is what's called a fresh awareness. Internal distractions are far more pernicious than external ones, because if your distraction is caused by some kind of change in the environment, like a sudden sound, or you smell what's cooking, or the change in the light in the room, or any other change, you're liable to know that you're distracted because it's a visible change. The power of the distraction itself causes you to notice that you're distracted, which makes it less dangerous. It's easy to deal with because you know that you're distracted. So then you simply look at that awareness. Internal distraction, because it's more subtle, is harder, a little harder to recognize in the beginning, because there's no external stimulus. It's simply a thought that arises for internal reasons. And it can be of any type. It can be desire, anger, stupidity, and each of these has potentially infinite varieties: anxiety, worry, whatever. But the response is the same. As soon as you recognize that you've become distracted, that recognizing awareness, you simply look at that and sustain that. And that's all that's needed. You don't need to do any more than that. There's nothing any better than that. He concludes the song, "The essence of all instructions is to cultivate it, to cultivate that recognizing awareness while walking, while sitting, and in all activities." And then in the last line, he gives the essential advice on bringing progress. Always cultivate as much devotion for your guru as you can. And then this was written by Barway Dorje in response to the repeated request of Gunpel and Sering. May the unmistaken ultimate nature be seen. Lasso.
Milarepa Lama tende pet no to Kausala Gonda, Kamba Hito tende Jigana, the use of Tavios. That Kamba Hito nan tende Jigana, that use of Tavios, the Teta Chala Jig, that Simon that was magic. Call that tende Chang, the Desamen, Kamba Hito Tina, the Chala, Konani that, Kojo Jig, on the phone number in Chala, somebody. Yes, them to that. The Samoan that will take a dance and a ma.
Samoa and a concept.
The chubas on the door.
Oh, Samoa. Oh,
when I yoga the part, that's on the chuba. Someone on that was. Yes, that the house of the Koran of Pajuki over the war.
Samoa,
that Davora, that's someone Davora. Pajuki, the Tenecon now, Tati Paju, the Shat, and got the Lacon, the got the jar. The name Tasha Suyaka, Sosa Lacon, the day your papa, the con, the day you time, and the Su de Lacon, the day you jago, then some of you down, did to Castle Pache, call ma, check your cocket in need to tell a joke somewhat. Then they shall get days and I was in Yaka, Sada Land, and they call Jaco, and they sent the Milarepa got them ja, but as them they were.
Oh, called the Samoa de Katun Dungeon, now along. Didn't Miller
that then they got in that the cows are called Milasum Toy one day. Oh, that your part does a bit, Chuba, your boy, that is on the diet, but then that was in the thing that you can name it. The Milarepa Taco carriage out the Gondi or the one. Tanga to you and not the Choba Jomet and things on the Tandak, Sanaga, and the Pajo thing, Pajo, the Tende Check or thing, the some of them was it now. Said to Castle, that taking a horse that's in the Somali. Then they call on a take jailer, young type of Choba race on one. That 10 hours now, same get nom dote, or that nom nine children, Jan, and take the mother on the day to Yona. Then nom dote take out Tanga Tanda in the Cheta, they the order the Tarson, the land or they got the Tanda of the Nin, the land or they got the Tanda of the Nin, my own ton, the day you saw singing that was taken in the Jenny. Then they some of the town and then the Gomma was on a Tanning, nom dog, Timari Mato. Then that was the time manager was the Becker Simboyore. Then he got us to our natural those.
I'll tell you a story. Once when Jitsun Milarepa was wandering, he came to the ruins of a house or dwelling and decided to spend the night in them. There was also a monk who was journeying somewhere, and he also decided to spend the night there. So they both slept in this dwelling. And the monk remained awake late in the night doing pious things, but all the while thinking of the cattle he owned. He had some cattle. And he was thinking, yeah, if I butcher them this year, then I'll get this much for the hide, and this much for this part of the meat, and this much for this part of the meat, and so on. And, making all of his plans for the disposal of one or more of his cattle. And then he went to sleep, and of course he got up early in the morning and boiled water, and then began his pious recitations, sitting there in, with his nice robes on and in perfect posture, chanting all the right things and all the right melodies. And Milarepa was, still sleeping. And the whole while he was doing his recitations, of course, the monk continued to plan on what he was going to do. That's the great thing about if you're trained in, the monastic tradition, you can do all the chants because you basically memorize them while thinking about anything you want. So you can think about, the cattle or cars or fancy watches or whatever it is. And by this point, the monk had done a great deal of very pious recitation while thinking about butchering cattle. And Milarepa was still sleeping, so the monk was very, disappointed. And he woke Milarepa up and he said, you look like some kind of itinerant yogin. I think, isn't it disgraceful that you're sleeping in this late? And Milarepa said, you're right. I usually get up quite early, but I couldn't sleep last night. I was just kept up by all these thoughts of butchering cattle and which joint would fetch which amount and all this stuff like that. It just kept me up all night, and so I let myself sleep in. Milarepa, of course, was aware of what the monk was thinking. So if we become that kind of Dharma practitioner where we look good on the outside but are completely rotten, worse than ordinary on the inside, then our practice might as well be called a garland of thoughts. It's not meditation. That's not Dharma. Any questions?
I'm going to just read the whole sentence and then you'll see. I thought to ask because this was the long question that you weren't sure what he was asking. Anyway, I thought to ask because I know not believing in the principle of karma can karmically lead to living in an environment where there's an absence of justice. I.e., if you believe that negative actions will lead to good effects, is there a similar effect if you have the conviction in the truth of the Dharma? Should I read that again?
No, I got it. The Driken the debt on the Tonga side.
Yeah.
True that.
Yeah.
That the Migewa chu Rere la Namenji Derbo down, the Zom Rere, the Drebushi Shire Yorawa. Da Lokta Sava the Leju Derbo la Yimi Chepage Derbo. Leju Derbo la Yimi Chepage Derbo la the Dapoke Derbo inside. The Miru Chewa Long Nayang, the Ne the Leju Derbo Misungkenge, Gelongpa the Che. The Dikpa Gewa in Laken down, Gewa Dikpa in Laken ke Longpa the Che Gerese. They demba re down. They demba yena, the Ne Leju Derbo la Yichepa ge gone, Dapo Derbo de mi Maumbala mi Chewa Longna. Tene gewa to Kelemba down, Dikpa to Kelemba Gelongpo the Chewa ge Derbo Yongerebe. Yep.
Yeah.
Basically, what is being addressed in the question is one of the 4 results. Each of the 10 unvirtuous actions leads to 4 results, one of which is called the environmental result. The environmental result of wrong view, the last of the 10, specifically defined in this context as not believing in the results of actions. The environmental result is, as the questioner indicated, to be born in a society in which virtue and wrongdoing are mixed up, where evil actions are believed to be good ones and good actions are believed to be bad ones. And therefore, by the same token, the environmental result of believing in karma is to be born in a society where good actions are seen as good and evil actions are seen as evil. Now, can we have one from here? You need the mic. Do you have the mic?
Rinpoche, I wanted to ask you to speak a bit more about what more precisely is meant by thought in meditation. I think that sort of colloquially or conventionally speaking, we consider thought to be a discursive process. That is, there's some element of formulating a story or a narrative to sensory experience. We, through one of our sensory doors, we have a perception, and then through habit, we focus more on one perception than another, and there's a little bit of a story about it. Oh, my foot hurts, or oh, she coughed loudly. But the impetus is the sense, as it were, or the perception. But is the thought the sort of the overlay of interpretiveness to the perception?
Mm-hmm. So you're only asking about thoughts based on immediate
no,
sense
I had
data.
and I had a secondary about the more internal.
Okay. Direla, namto sewa karere. Chilon so ngatso ke namto samno thongwa yana. Pena gonga ke shepa ke zuk ge gone zuk nangi ore dra toki ore de namto mare. De nyamnyong sam. Yinang dela de dushe chana or de mapore de karpore de yagare de dogare. Da yana dene o kangba nagi do yana moge lawa shuk chempo japson sabate dezo namto re sabate chikparebe. Yep.
So the thought, what's meant by namtok, is more the overlay on the direct perception.
Yes.
Internally, it's more difficult because, it seems like there's the sea of kleshas, the churning of kleshic tendencies, and then because of our particular karmic habits, we focus or we allow one little section of the wave of kleshas to sort of grab our attention. Mm-hmm. And then we become a little bit descriptive about that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if descriptive is the right word, but our attention, because of our habit, grasps onto an aspect of this internal motion.
Yenang de zo gonga ge shepa ge ge chen la tene shawa ge namtores. Da gonga ge shepa ge chen ma yimbe kapso pena ngatso ge nyomong de semla namto mepe kapso nyomong de zo yore batla nyal yores. Dene de zo nyomong de zo de jundu yopa tam de ge bakchak de jundu yopa ge tobje samsam dene ngusu nyomong ge namto ngusu shagi yores. Deyang dene dampo nyomong sam batla nyaldo de namto mares. Nyomong yembala namto mares. Ngusu samla shado de ngusu shado de namto nyomong ge namto re derebes. Ta degi chepa moronge lagido. Ta chikta na ngatsa nyomong ge bakcha yorwa. Pena de nikot na yang de mena yang nyomong ge bakcha yorwa. Ina de namto du shagamares. De dona nyomong tsam dang namto ke chepare. Di keshare. Ta mombo songa de nyomong ge sabun tsam de dompa nyomong pe yiche namshela yorwa. De nyomong ngonsumba de ngatsa ge drokpa yiche namche ke yulda jawala namto segi yorwa. Degi chepare. Ine de jungi keshare. Mengaki keshamare. Nyamnyongi keshamare. Well, basically, the distinction you're making in the second part of your question is between the habit of kleshas,
Yes.
which is the seventh consciousness, which is all varieties. It all comes down to selfishness, really, and then that we can't say that that's not present when we're not thinking, because after all, when we're deeply asleep, we're not thinking. But then what we know of as kleshas, when you actually feel a klesha, that's not the seventh consciousness, that's the sixth consciousness. And any feeling of a klesha is considered a thought, and a conceptual thought, because, in the textual tradition, because it's a function or action of the sixth consciousness. What Trungurumshe used to say about this, sometimes you might find it helpful, is don't forget that the six consciousnesses, the five sense consciousness and the sixth consciousness, the mental consciousness, are sporadic.
Yes.
The seventh and eighth are unfluctuating. And so the seventh and eighth are independent of whether we're thinking or not, whether we're conscious or not, how we're feeling, and so on. They're just continuous until they're purified. So anything that we detect, anything that we feel consciously, is usually the sixth consciousness, because you can't detect that which is unvarying. That's what he said.
So in that sense, the arising of thought, that is the intermittent eruption of the sixth consciousness, is actually the opportunity to see the seventh, or to be aware that it's present, and to see into its.
Delat na nyinkado, de drupa yiche nyomong samla de nyunyi de norwa ke nyinkayo sangado. Kare de nyunyi de pe sapore, de sapo yaga dan zapa doga nyinkayo right, de sapo dogare. There's a bit of a danger with that, because you're not actually seeing the seventh consciousness.
Right.
You're not seeing it. I hate to use the word unconscious, because then people are always going to bring up Jung. But it's unconscious. It's not an object. The seventh consciousness is, we're not aware of it. It's like when you're in the water, you're not aware that you're wet. And if you look at your body, you don't see wetness. But when you come out of the water, you notice it. The seventh consciousness is like the wetness that is so ubiquitous that it's not noticeable. There's probably in probably in the Abhisamaya Lankara, there's a detailed description of at what point a bodhisattva becomes aware of and quells the seventh consciousness, but it's not something that we're doing right now. So basically, we're dealing with the sixth.
And how, in terms of the sixth consciousness, and more specifically, the klesha of heavy ignorance or torpor, how is that different than the seventh consciousness?
Deni bekakare. De ngotso ke ngunsomba ke timu dene. Pana timu rakba de nido doala sopa de so dang chitong so semla sacha ya payat na madre yorwa. De sama timu ke nyomore. Timok de dang nyunyi samde kakarawa. De drukpa ke jelere. Well, that again is all this stuff that we experience as beginners. You know, we're all beginners. Until you achieve the path of seeing, you're a beginner. Is all the sixth.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, these are symptoms of the seventh consciousness. The best way to think of the seventh consciousness is it's the ongoing error of mistaking the eighth consciousness to be a self. And what we know as kleshas and ignorance and so on, that's all sixth consciousness. That's all just the tip of the iceberg.
Kedange namto singhe de jama.
Lasso.
Namto ngo chukur songba yin song de wa. Jin mai jin cha wa la man ka ro ba cha bu kom jin song de wa. Ta te namto jata tongda theta mang bu sha ju yo de ka se sha na nyema la wazir pe ma se pa gen zamne yon sa ba tham bi sat to pe nyeme ko wazir ho de nyeme ke te koda do re ma to te ngone tan nyeme ki chong ha ya ma de wa. Te in the Dangana so la no Koran nam to the yores. Nam to Yata Tita Tonta Mambo Yore, the Tamche, the Chuk Coco, Ozedao, Re Mato Chick, Tele Los Chubakaya Maris, that nam dog is yes and you what take a less of yours. Take nam dog is yes and you what the Yons Dabakari in a te. Pangogi Koranta, Kato Gogi Yota Bato, Namto, Masha Vajata, Shandawa in a mato, Tani Yunga Maria Tente, Koran Pangoyagi Johnson Yomadingo, some chicken only. Take Koran Kara, Yajana, take a leg, Hanya Chigi Yomadi, contact the Yodis.
But there's an implication of your questions, which is very important, which is that you need to remember that thoughts are not bad. Thoughts are not a problem. Thoughts are always an opportunity for a meditator, because when a thought arises, if you can see its nature, that's the easiest way to discover the Dharmakaya. And in that discovery, you don't need to worry about levels of consciousness or anything. Just like, for example, even if something's the tip of the iceberg, if you look at the tip of the iceberg, you are seeing ice. You don't need to go to the bottom of the iceberg. You just sort of need to know it's there. So if you discover the thoughts, because they are objects of manifest consciousness, because they are sporadic events, they're easy to detect. And therefore, they're opportunities. And they're not going to stop. We don't want thoughts to stop. We don't need thoughts to stop. All we need to do is not follow them. If you follow your thoughts, that's how you accumulate karma. Rinpoche said we don't accumulate karma through having a thought. We accumulate karma through choosing to follow that thought. Now that choice happens very quickly because we're used to making it. But it is a choice, and that's how we accumulate karma. You choose to follow that thought. You decide, well, this thought is special. And you accumulate karma, good or bad, depending upon what it is. And he used another analogy. He said that thoughts are as natural to the mind as sunlight is to the sun. And the sunlight emitted by the sun does not darken the sun. That thoughts do not obscure the mind, just as sunlight does not darken the sun. So they're an opportunity. And then you don't need to worry about the levels of consciousness and the gekung je yopa ke kang pa chik na na.
Take some there would.
Because we've strayed into book stuff with the the levels of consciousness, it's always important to remember that in the tradition of special instruction, we don't differentiate between the consciousnesses because we don't need to. We're dealing with the essence of the whole thing. And traditionally it's said that, if you're looking at it theoretically from the outside, then there seem to be 8 consciousnesses, and we're talking about what seems to be. But really there's only just one per person. It's a little bit like looking at a house from the outside or the inside. If you look at a house from the outside, a house with 8 windows that contains one monkey, then because monkeys move fast and move a lot, you would think there are 8 monkeys because there are 8 windows. But if you go in the house, which I don't suggest you do if there's a monkey in the house, but if you go in the house, looking at the house from the outside is like study and theory and, that analysis. Going in the house is like what we're trying to do. And if you go in the house, you discover there's just one monkey. But he bounces back and forth so fast that,
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you about sound. And, sometimes when I'm in the city, I'll sit in the subway and I'll close my eyes and I'll just sort of absorb what's going on. I feel very comfortable in the subway in New York, by the way. For some reason, I feel like a certain anonymity. Even though there's lots of things going on, it's always kind of fun to see, so in this way, with this kind of sound around, is it the same as a thought? So you kind of, you just say, okay, there's a drum in my ear, and there's this, you just notice it, and you look at the sound the same way? Or because it's more, I feel like sound enters you in a very different way? Mm-hmm. Like you have a more sensorial effect on you?
Dra tupa tsamde namto marenayang namto nanjin gomna dregerepe pena kong ke tsamza New York dongcher the drogio de doe kasa dene sau ke rele den la patso drogios sau ke rele de la dra tempo yore mo gagio gomsare gagio chipoyo den de dene dra shuk tempo de yodo dra de ke ngola tana dregerepe
That taking all that decade. Gadu can now thought they are your sour.
Well, yes and no. If you're meditating by looking directly at the nature of the sound, then that's meditation. But if you're just enjoying the sound because of its familiarity and associations and so on, that's just thought.
But you can look at that the same way.
Yes, but then you're looking at the thought, not at the sound. Yeah.
Thank you, Rinpoche. So I just want to relate an anecdote that I was at a performance in the city last night, and it included screaming literally for 4 minutes. And
I hope it was theater.
It was. The only way I got through it was actually I meditated on the sound, and I almost went to sleep while the person was screaming. So it was actually kind of a wonderful experience, I have to say.
He does that all the time.
Really?
When you take him to the movies, one time I took him to this movie. It wasn't Tarantino. It was Tarantino's protege. It was called Once Upon a Time in Mexico. And yeah, that's right, Rodriguez. And it was, the sound was yanked way up, and we were in the first row. And it was unbelievably loud, and had, Johnny Depp getting his eyes carved out by not the guy who lives around here. Anyway, it was a nasty movie with all kinds of violence and really, really loud. He went to sleep.
Very good to sleep.
Okay, the question I have, I know this is going to sound, I know I've heard this over and over again, but something just seemed to click for me today. Rinpoche, are you saying that that's really all we have to do is just look at the mind and keep going back there? That's it?
That's very good. Okay.
Okay.
was just checking it.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'd like to go back to the song, and it just, I had it when we were discussing the song, and it's staying in my mind. But at the very end, when Barway Dorje says, always cultivate as much devotion for your guru as you can, you know, I understand the words, you know, obviously, they're English. But I just wanted to just hear a little bit more of the meaning of that, because it, I thought it was very interesting that that was the last sentence of this song. You know, when what we're discussing is awareness of our thoughts. So I would just like to know
Why
why.
the position within
Yes.
the song. Di data de dereng ke songpa ke songo ke nane. Tu jendo tene gola lama mugo don de so mombo songyo re. Songo de nala de drenje don drenrik ke ko changchang song. Dene tsik tama dela lama mugo gang tup tup zo songpa res. De tama la yong jutsen chere.
다 해당 초비 두준 타서봐 라면 로바샤나 다 제가 대가랑 초세는 변나단 jam공게 단다 제도 내두기나 송여와데 대 인도 값살다 코나 검게 나니 tene ransem ta lamatan dami ndawoji shal topayina tene tele kond mepigeten onege khara pheon chembota dewo chembota tene nelo yang ta bi sol mangbota song yo ware stondo pe Yeshe yebanda wore ngana so thanda lapto gon te ja sumo re to da wo paje re yo mari te in the capsula ta lame robar shana chikyo yin sen song re ta tela ten song mendos
Probably
so nyamne ya wo yon ke jin jere si ta lame robar che sha so mu
Probably because devotion for the guru is the ultimate final instruction. It's how to actually achieve all of the things mentioned above that. In his summary of the generation and completion stages, Jongolo Drutai writes, if you see all of the peaceful and wrathful deities as simply the display of your guru, that is all sufficient. Not just deities, but if we can see everything as the display of our guru through devotion, then that is the ultimate instruction. That is the real key to realization. So it's evident that these two disciples who requested this song had a quite advanced level of practice. And we can infer that from the contents of the song in general, and especially from the fact that at the end, he mentions sort of this ultimate key to the whole thing. Lasa?
Pongola taki gati jamna devo shita yomaris chataris
Lasa?
Pongola pongo gati jamti han devo yoris
Lasa?
Pongo gati tala jamni han devo yomaris chontaris tenda wori pena donga da menga thi singe tela tuk sabe ke kapsala teni lame ke swama rere yendo la pena sonya da wori mato jege yondo la chap devo na wo te su kombo yoris in the time they gonna Koranso, they double chicken, Tula Papi, Soma Chilla, Sonya, what was. And I thought Tanda Kona Solan, that with Yamu, your mother thing, Ake Kagi Shaggy, or the chance of Yangi, or the tat, and that was a good tone, but Kadi that was a luxury or what.
We need to remember, as always, that these songs were written for various specific disciples. And so the emphasis of each song, the order in which various topics are presented, whether devotion is presented as a preliminary or as the final cap on the whole thing, this is all to suit the specific disposition, specific abilities, strengths of those individual disciples. It may not fit us. We simply have to accept in studying these songs that a horse's saddle is not going to work, fit, or look very good on a donkey. You know, donkeys, well, hey, I don't mean it in a bad way. I can't speak for him. I mean, I do speak for him, but I can't speak for him. You know, said, and by the same token, if you took a donkey saddle and you tried to put it on a horse, it wouldn't work, fit, or look good. You know, donkeys and horses are different. They each need their own proper, there's a word for saddlery for that stuff. No, there's a generic word for tackle. They need their own stuff. And so, you know, to a certain extent, when we study these songs, we are donkeys trying to wear the saddles of horses. Because this song, you know, he said this song is describing a level of practice that he said no one here has reached. He said, I haven't reached it, you haven't reached it. I'm doing my best to explain the meaning of these songs, you know, as best as I understand it without having achieved the wisdom described in them. And you're doing your best to listen to the meaning of the songs without really, frankly, having any idea of this level of practice. So, but, you know, so being that we're donkeys wearing horses' saddles, the straps may not fit exactly. Again, I didn't mean that in a bad way. I can't speak for him. So that given how short I am, I definitely know that no saddle would fit me, so I'm out of the whole thing. A whole lot of questions?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, let's take.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. One by one, and then we'll see.
Well, I think the first two just about.
Good. Just, choose ones that are on the topic, but not yet answered.
Okay, because these, I think, have been, let me just go. So, could Rinpoche elaborate on what a student must be sure to do to hold up their 50% of the blanket?
Okay. The Lama ge jacha ngachu tampa da lome jacha ngachu tampa yo song song. Loma ge jacha ngachu tampa de yapo tek topam gen kur topa la karego gitu.
Tate pache danji gana so tek sho songo.
Laso.
Songba. Teni kora te soso la nepekin duhi, shura mingin duhi. Teni kora ta chuki, chukin la teni membekin duhi chik lapsoma.
Well, as I said briefly before, I think the principal way to uphold the disciple or student's 50% of the bargain or the contract is by having this threefold perception, that the teacher is like a physician, the Dharma taught is medicine, and the person is ill and therefore has to actually take the medicine. And that's sufficient. That practicing Dharma is taking the medicine so as to be cured as soon as possible. That's enough. It would be both inappropriate and unnecessary to go into the specifics of various vows and samayas incurred by different practices. The basic thing is that threefold perception. Next question.
What I'm going to do is summarize. I've got a few questions on this, but basically it's asking what are the techniques you can use to look at the thoughts and not get distracted from that.
Namdo shawai kaso namdo ke ngo la ta namdo ke ma yengma ke tap kanda ko gitu. Dona namdo tawai kaso de namdo dona namdo shawai kaso ma yeng namdo ke ma yengma namdo ke ngo la Ta tupa ki tap kandro go.
Tondo la ta sem ne tap go de chi sing ke mangbo chi yo ma.
Los.
Jo.
Let it.
Ta te gu na ta na ga de ma to pe mangbo yo de. Nan de so to ai se la yo ma.
Well, there are many stages to learning to do this, and they must be begun by what are called the 9 methods of resting the mind, which are the 9 aspects of tranquility practice.
Yo song yan.
And you can find these in written about in books. We don't have time to go through them all this morning. So we're going to stop here.
Sona yige le zang we damba gen do ba yo zang jo zen ne rumbo je ma je ba na je je
Chamba nyamba
ba me ba kong ne kong de be wa yo zim je dam je de da den jo je ngin ro dam je da do dom ba sanjo samba anda sanjo de da ga je ma la ra ba yo sanje re je zen zen dam be ga ra jar ga de ya dan da ra len ba za je me za je ve sang a je zi ge zong da ja be tra ye yo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I know. You know what? The donkey horse thing, also not my.
No.
Yes, I know. Not my monkey. Not my monkey.
No,